Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyrannix1 here, and you're probably wondering why I'm going to be using Borderlands 2 footage for the Borderlands 1 review. It's mainly because I had a bit of difficulty trying to get footage for the first Borderlands game, so I decided instead to just use Borderlands 2. I mean, they're not particularly that much different when it comes to visuals, so I thought I may as well kill two birds with one stone. I did try to attempt to try and record footage with the first Borderlands game, but it didn't necessarily work well for me, so I just went ahead and used Borderlands 2. So I hope you guys enjoy this review, and hopefully soon I'll be doing the Borderlands 2 review after this one. Yo, what is up guys, this is Tyrannix1 here, and welcome to another game review. This time I'm reviewing Borderlands 1, a action role-playing first-person shooter developed by Gearbox Software and published by 2K Games. Now, the story follows a group of vault hunters who came to the planet of Pandora to find a mysterious vault that is supposed to have legendary riches. And that is pretty much the gist of the story, because everything else is pretty much boring. Yeah. For considering how popular Borderlands 2 is, Borderlands 1 is pretty much probably the weakest of the Borderlands games in the franchise, and this is the first one. But considering it is the first one, it gave the developers a chance to develop a lot more in the future. But nevertheless, the story in this game was bland. And yes, there's most of the time when I was playing this game, even the main missions themselves were not exciting when you think about it, until you get to the very end. To be honest, even the final boss battle's a bit meh too. But yeah, it's like a lot of things in this game just did not do much for me. Even the side missions themselves felt repetitive and pretty damn boring, to be honest. And so yeah, if you come in here for a story, you're not really going to get much whatsoever. This is mainly just a game where you're just using as many guns as you can, trying to complete a bunch of missions, and then basically that you find the vault, and yeah, the game ends with you finding the vault, and you pretty much have to fight this big giant boss. And even then, when there's even two of us, I mean, I was playing this with my friend, we beat that boss fairly easily. Apparently it's supposed to be difficult as hell, but we killed that thing pretty easily. Maybe it's because we did all the side missions and leveled ourselves up to the point where we were able to kick his ass. And even then, the ending is disappointing too. It's like it just ends. Like, that's it. And yeah, and everything else, even the characters in this game are boring as hell. They don't really provide much, to be honest. I mean, hell, I probably even think the DLC probably did better in this game. Or not, because I mean, there was some DLC that was still boring as hell because they just dragged on and on. But yeah, the story for this game, the characters, aren't particularly very interesting. Now, when it comes to the character design, you do have a choice of choosing between 4 different types of vault hunters. You have a siren called Lilith, you have a soldier called Roland, you have a sniper called Mordecai, and you have like a big tough guy known as Brick. Now, each of these characters have their own different types of abilities and skills. Roland mainly has a turret as a special skill, which is mainly used as a supporting role. Lilith has her siren abilities, which are mainly supposed to be used for medical uses. Mainly she uses medic, but Roland can sort of help that area too. Drake is a guy whose main ability is mainly just to use his fist to kill as many enemies as he can. And Mordecai, despite being a sniper, his special skill is in fact his sidekick bird, Bloodwing, which is mainly used as a distracting tool for the enemies so the others can take them out. Now, I will honestly say the skills weren't too bad. The skill tree itself was actually done particularly quite well, considering there is a nice amount of choices to choose from, and which could benefit you and your team a lot. But you can't really customize your characters that much. You can only change the colors, and that's pretty much it, which was pretty disappointing, considering that's all you can do. And it's the same when you get a vehicle in the game as well. You can only change the colors, and yeah, that is particularly very disappointing, considering if you're going to be playing a game that's probably, I have no idea how long, because this game took us a very long time to do. Possibly, probably at least 100 hours, from what I can remember. and possibly even more. But that's if you count in the DLC too. But yeah, if you can only change the colors of your character, then that's gonna be very bland and boring. Considering it's a first-person aspect, it's still nice to see your character, you know, a little bit more, a little bit different, a little bit more cool looking, instead of just looking at the different types of colors that you have. But yeah, at least the character the skill tree is pretty decent, to be honest. But the character customization and the customization of the vehicle itself aren't particularly that good. And then you have the amount of weapons in the game too. Now, the weapons, there is a lot of weapons in this game. That's pretty much what Borderlands is mainly supposed to be about, is finding as many badass weapons as you can. But the fact that the weapons in Borderlands 1 don't look particularly very exciting or cool at all, kind of is a little bit disappointing. And considering you have many different types of weapons ranging from assault rifles, shotguns, pistols, submachine guns, sniper rifles, rocket launchers, even Iridian weaponry, which are like alien weaponry found on the planet, which are probably the only decent looking weaponry in the game with the Iridian weaponry. And even when you do, and each of these weapons are scaled in different colored ranks, ranging from white to green to blue to purple to orange. And yeah, considering purple is pretty much the best type of weapon that you can find, along with orange if you can, there's not very many particular differences from the designs, apart from probably different sights and stuff like that. But most of the weaponry look the same, which is quite disappointing in some aspects, considering since this is an open world type game. And since it mainly relies on you finding different types of weaponry, it is very disappointing the fact that the designs of the weapons look very bland and boring. I'm not saying there's a bad variety of weapons, there's a very nice variety of weapons in this game. It's just the fact that the designs of the weapons don't look particularly interesting, apart from the Iridian weaponry. So yeah, so Borderlands pretty much does fail in a lot of aspects, pretty much that's supposed to keep you going in the game. It has a poor story, dull characters, the customization isn't done particularly well, apart from the skill tree, which is actually done pretty well, and the weapons themselves aren't particularly that great either. And you can actually store these in your backpack for a certain amount, well, considering how much space you have, and you can actually carry up to 4 weapons at a time, which is actually pretty convenient if you're going to be going up against a lot of tough enemies in the future. Now, considering the enemy types in this game, it ranges pretty much from bandits to the wildlife around you to probably special forces like the Crimson Raiders. Now, these enemies can be quite difficult at times to fight against, depending on how many people you're playing with in the game, because the amount of people in the game actually increases the difficulty that the enemies are. And so yeah, so if you're gonna playing this on your own is even more freaking boring than with more people, but I would consider playing this game with more people, despite the difficulty increase. But the enemies themselves aren't. There's many different types of them, to be honest. Like the bandits have your sort of infantry guys who use guns and stuff. Then you have their sort of melee type guys, you know, like the little psycho guys, and they even have vehicles too for you to fight against. But the bandits and even the wildlife are probably the most interesting enemies, since there's quite a nice amount of designs for them. But yeah, and the Crimson Raiders look like sort of evil, battered stormtroopers of sorts. But the enemies didn't feel like they were great to fight against. I mean, they were more of a pain in the ass to fight against, really. Depending on the weaponry you have against them, they can prove to be a bit of hell to fight against. So yeah, the enemies in this game, it's difficult to really understand what they're for. I mean, the bandits are obviously there, of course, because they're bandits. But like I said, the enemies in this game just aren't really that particularly fun to fight against. Considering they destroy endless amounts, and they can be quite tough at times. And it's even towards the end of the game, they start throwing in these special Iridian enemies, and those guys are a pain in the ass. I really hated those guys. They pretty much would just mainly relied on their shield for health, and once you get rid of their shields, they're pretty much done for. But they were a pain in the ass, and they're quite tough to hit too, considering they fly most of the time. And like are pretty skeletal looking too, which makes them pretty hard to hit. But yeah, the enemies in this game weren't really that fun to fight against, and they just really felt more of a nuisance, really. Now the level designs, the world itself looked pretty boring too. It just merely looked like one big, huge desert. I know Pandora is supposed to be a pretty lifeless planet, but you don't need to make almost all of it lifeless. I mean, you do go into caves and stuff at certain points, but I felt like there wasn't really much variety to the different scenery and areas in the game, and it really didn't help with trying to make with the game being boring enough as it is. It didn't help that the fact that I'm just going through the same looking type areas over and over, and yeah, that just really did not help. There is a bit of strategy to this game, at least, when it comes to fighting the enemies as well. It's the fact that it's always best to try and find the critical damage areas too. Since each enemies have their different critical damage areas, the bandits and the Crimson Raiders obviously need to die quicker by headshots. But the environmental life forms on Pandora, of course, and they have different weaknesses, and it's always best to try and find their weaknesses as quickly as possible, otherwise you're going to get overrun and destroyed by them. But yeah, there's also because of the size of the maps too, there is obviously a vehicle you can use to navigate your way around. But yeah, the Land Runner, it is particularly difficult to drive at times, obviously going like freaking being uncontrollable at times, and it is always best to have like it can carry up to 2 people, a driver and someone in the turret, and it's always best to make sure you have that, because if you have someone trustworthy who can drive it properly and then someone who's in a turret who can actually shoot, then you might actually be able to get away with some things. But yeah, mainly the stuff with Borderlands 1, with the amount of stuff that it has, it is a very particularly boring game. I don't really, it's not particularly, even the DLC, there was at times some interest in them, but then it quickly died down just as quickly. So yeah, the game has a particularly boring story. Characters aren't really much better either. The guns weren't particularly that decent either. There's only like a few decent things, like the skill tree. You can buy weapons and ability. You do also have like shields, grenades, and some other types of equipment to use as well to make yourself a bit more protected. And of course, finding better ones of these. Some of the shields have certain abilities to them that will make you a bit more difficult to kill. So it's always best to find the best grenades, weapons, and shields that you can. And you can obviously buy these from vending machines too, like the ammo, the weapon, and medical vending machines, which are always nice as long as you have a good amount of money. As long as you have money, you can buy this stuff. But yeah, overall, I think Borderlands 1 isn't particularly a very decent game. It's best to be, if you're gonna play it with friends. Otherwise, you're not gonna have a very enjoyable time, because if you're playing this on your own, you may as well just quit while you're ahead. This game, yeah, playing with 2 people, I mean, is still enough, but at least playing with 4 people, it might quicken the time if to complete it. Because considering if you have 4 people, that means you have like twice the amount of people helping out, killing enemies. But yeah, Borderlands 1, not a very decent game. I think it's probably just above average, to be honest, only just. And so yeah, overall I'm going to give Borderlands 1 a 5.5. So, that is my review of Borderlands 1. Yeah, this could definitely have been better, to be honest, but luckily the later installments of the franchise do definitely make a massive improvement over the first Borderlands. So, hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Leave a like down below, comment on what you think is right or wrong with the game, comment down below what other games you want me to do, and I shall see you guys in the next random video.